I'm sure we've all heard of the saying communication is key, but how many of us actually put that into practice? How many of us actually bother having difficult conversations with our loved ones, whether it be our friends, family, or partner? Whoever that might be to you, think of the last time you actually sat down and engaged in a meaningful conversation with that person and actually came to some sort of consensus. If your answer is along the lines of I don't know or I can't remember, then you've clicked on the correct video. I myself am guilty of not being intentional with having important conversations when it's due. I think our inability to communicate, or rather why we are so ineffective at communication, lies in one or more of these three factors. The first being the lack of perspective. Essentially what perspective is viewing things from a third person point of view. It's not very easy for us to do, and a lot of us lack the self-awareness to admit our own faults and mistakes, and a lot of us can't seem to put ourselves in the other party or the other person's shoes, and that doesn't do us any good. We are essentially digging ourselves into this rabbit hole whereby we think we're always right, and then we end up adopting somewhat of a victim mindset whereby we think the other party or your external circumstances are the problem, when in fact you might be the problem in certain situations. Not saying all situations, but I think having the ability to look at things from a third person lens will really help you. I think we all know what perspective is. We all subconsciously know what self-awareness is. We've probably heard conversations about self-awareness, perspective, all these things. But I think we often neglect it for a couple of reasons. One, like I said, it's not easy to put into practice. So I think what we do as a result of that is we take the easy way out, which is essentially to blame our circumstances or blame the other party who we think might be at fault for our negative situation, instead of reflecting and trying to understand where the other person is coming from, and trying to understand where we might have went wrong, which essentially caused the other person to act in a certain way. This might be somewhat of an exaggeration, but because we think that we are innocent, we think that we are the victim in every situation, we sometimes resort to drastic measures. One example of that would be cutting ties with whoever you think might be the problem, instead of actually engaging with the person and having open communication and just simply flipping the perspective and trying to understand where the person is coming from. In the long run, that isn't going to be helpful. Whenever something goes wrong, we are just going to cut ties, and I don't think that is very sustainable. Of course, I'm not saying that you are the problem in every situation, but I think no matter what, it's important for you to understand where the other person might be coming from and why they think in the way they do. Basically, try to grasp that perspective, because even if they might be at fault, right, visualizing yourself in their shoes, in their scenario, can actually help you develop some sort of empathy and show them some sort of grace, which can also lighten the mood, can also make you less agitated. So either way, whether you're the problem or not, putting some sort of perspective into play can diffuse the situation and allow you to have more efficient and effective conversations without resorting to drastic measures. I believe that by doing this and by having intentional conversations with people around you, a lot of petty disagreements, a lot of petty arguments would be solved. Moving on to point number 2, this is more applicable in professional settings, in workplaces, in schools, in more professional settings. I think in more professional settings, we tend to fear what other people might think of us if we speak up. So a lot of times we might have something we want to bring up, we might have something we want to speak out on, but then because we are afraid that your opinion might not be something that's popular with the rest, it might be something that goes against the opinions of the majority, you might end up not speaking up. And so when you have this avoidance mindset, over time you start to compromise and you start to let everything slide. Even if the problem might be affecting you, you tell yourself that the problem isn't too big of a deal and you can still handle it, because you rather deal with the problem than speak up and face oppression. I think a lot of us just fear the opinions of the public, of what other people might think of us. Then as a result, we end up keeping quiet. Again, this is not very clear cut. There are instances whereby it's probably more worth the while to suppress the problem and not bring it up, because bringing the problem up might cause some sort of unnecessary uproar. But I think when the problem is really affecting you, that is when you know you have to speak up. What I challenge you to do is adopt this posture whereby you speak up. Here's another thing. Maybe you sharing the viewpoint will also alleviate the pressure from the rest. Maybe other people around you also have the same concern, but by taking the courage to share it, you could essentially be helping a bunch of other people around you. And now to dig at the root cause of this issue, which is the fear of oppression. I think why we fear oppression so much and why we fear being outcasted is because of, again, pride. I think a lot of us are egotistical in one way or another. Even if we are not extremely egotistical, we have some sort of pride. We have some sort of reputation, you can say. We try so hard a lot of times to protect that reputation, to try to protect ourselves because we don't want that reputation to be destroyed, right? So again, I think it's pride. Feeling that this reputation is your everything. So dealing with the problem is far better than tarnishing this reputation. Only way to go about this, like I said, is to really humble yourself and to realize that your reputation is not everything, even though it plays a huge part of who you are. Humbling yourself might actually make speaking up easier, because when you humble yourself, you tend to be less susceptible, because if you have nothing to lose, then I think you wouldn't fear oppression as much as when you have something to lose, when you have this sort of pride and this sort of ego. So I think humble yourselves and realize that people's opinions are not everything. And I want to share with you a concept which is not commonly talked about when it comes to communication, and that is active listening. I think a lot of us don't practice active listening enough. We listen to what the person talking has to say, but we don't process it while they speak. A lot of us sometimes are not even listening. We are so engrossed with our smartphones. We are scrolling Instagram, or scrolling TikTok. Whatever the person says comes in one ear, goes out the other. We aren't actually listening. But there's more to listening than just hearing what the person is saying. Active listening is essentially decoding every sentence, every word the other party is saying, and trying to put yourself in their shoes, trying to understand where they're coming from. Again, perspective is put into play in active listening. Active listening is, I think, as crucial when it comes to the art of communication. When we talk about communication, I know we normally talk about speaking. We normally correlate it and associate it with speaking, but active listening plays an equally important role, I feel. So by actually processing what the other person is saying and actually decoding it, you avoid so many misunderstandings, miscommunications, which stem from, again, the lack of perspective. Because again, when you actually process what the other person is saying and actively take the effort to understand where they're coming from, it helps you sort of empathize with them. So cuts down on a lot of potential misunderstandings. So this is one point that I thought was really interesting to bring up. All in all, communication is part and parcel of our daily lives. So I think it's time we pay more attention to it, because we often overlook it. Pay more attention and see how it actually affects our relationships and how it affects our connections with people around us, and try to work on developing not only our speaking skills but also our listening skills too. I truly believe that by being vulnerable with people around you and taking time to have difficult conversations, you develop much stronger relationships. My challenge for y'all today is to put some of the things I've said into action the next time you face a roadblock in terms of communication with your loved ones.